Welcome, everyone. So this is SmartBug's monthly SmartTake webinar series, where every month we dive into new features and enhancements being rolled out by HubSpot. My name is Nikki Kamau. I am the Senior Manager of Partner Programs here at SmartBug Media, and I will be your host for today's event. So I think this is our third season actually that we've got the SmartTake series going on. So we're really excited to kick off this year right after Inbound, which, as you can see, is going to be an offshoot of the features that were released there. So it's an exciting way for us to dive in a little bit deeper. So our speakers, these are some of the smartest people that I know in inbound, RevOps, MarTech space. And luckily, it's kind of a fun thing today. I've got two Jeffs with me. So the first speaker that I'd love to introduce is Jeff Vincent. He is the product manager on the CRM at HubSpot. And fun fact, he likes making coffee, but he doesn't drink it. And actually, if we can flip over to the next screen here, there we go. Now we can see everybody live. So Jeff, welcome. HubSpot, Jeff.
Hi. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. I'm even more excited to be the first guest in the season. I'm going to do my best to live up to that billing.
Love it. We're so glad to have you. And next, I'd love to welcome Jeff Ostagai. He is SmartBug's VP of Client Services. Jeff's career has been spent leading and mentoring teams in development and results-driven multi-channel campaigns. He has over 2 decades of experience in digital marketing, research, planning, and execution. And I'm just so excited to have you on with us today.
Thrilled to be here. And I would add, I don't like making coffee, but I really like drinking it. So we can start there, Jeff.
We're a perfect pair.
You guys are perfect.
I think you all might live close to each other too. Maybe something can be worked out there.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. If you deliver, let me know, Jeff.
Wonderful. All right. So I'm going to it looks like we've got the poll results in. So hold on here. I'm going to get us set up so that we can see those. All right. All right. So both of our Jeffs are well versed in the power of having clean data in your CRM. And all of us are well aware of how truly detrimental and confusing it can be when that data is mismanaged. So let's start off by quickly touching base on the state of your data with the results from our poll. So how do all of you feel about your CRM data? And let me share my screen. All right, there we go. Does everybody see the results here? Hopefully. Okay, so we have most of us saying that they've got dirty data, which is not a surprise. If any of you watched the Spotlight, I'm pretty sure, was it Stephanie or Yamini that said, look to the person on your left, look to the person on your right, they have bad data. It's all of us, right? And then we've got the next set here is that individuals feel like they've got disparate systems, so there are multiple sources of truth. Also makes complete sense, right? We've got all of these different MarTech that we're integrating with each other, and we're gathering data in through each of them. And so it's kind of hard to make sense of how to get that clean. So thank you everybody for participating in that. The great news is that today we're going to be discussing ways to improve your CRM data and make it more useful for everyone through things like building custom objects, the new visualization tools that we're rolling out, like the data model overview, and customization of views by teams on records, which is also really exciting. So let's dig in a little bit to the data management portion of this. SmartBug Jeff, I know that the data that HubSpot presented at Inbound resonated with me. And I'd love to hear what you think.
Yeah, same, obviously. And it wasn't just the data, right? I mean, I think the themes that were presented around, a crisis of disconnection and, the truly connected customer. I'm a marketer, but, I'm a customer too, right? And, when you hear those kinds of things, it certainly resonates you in terms of what we do every day, but it also resonates in terms of the experience that you have as a consumer. And I saw a piece of data the other day. It was something like 60% of customers say that, a poor experience will lead them to go elsewhere. And you can Google it. There's dozens of other stories and anecdotes related to that. And it really does speak to, you know, the heightened expectations that people have for their engagements with companies these days. You know, there are a couple pieces of data, specific pieces of data that Stephanie presented were really interesting, right? You know, 60% of CRM data goes completely unused. 40% of ops time goes to trying to clean up that data, even if a large percentage of it is going unused. And only 3% of companies have data that meets, you know, basic quality standards. So it just really speaks to, you know, that whole thing about look left, look right, the results we see here, Nikki. Like, it's not a surprise, right? I mean, everybody's kind of in the same boat, and the question is, where do we go from here, right? And the idea of what to do next and how you untangle that can get really, really overwhelming. So I think the question really for us is like, how did we get here in the first place, right? And, you know, it really starts in a lot of ways with the lack of process, too many cooks, right? Lots of people entering information into CRMs, lots of data being flowed into that CRM, lots of people playing around with the data, manipulating the data. And it just reaches a point where it's like, what do we do with this, right? And it really just goes to show that if you don't have someone or something, right, tools or people keeping an eye on things, you're just going to get to a place where it's just not accurate, it's just not useful, and becomes incredibly time consuming to clean that up. And I think it's what makes, you know, a lot of what was presented in Inbound just so compelling. And I know Jeff will go into it in more detail, but you know, simpler tools, more visual tools, being able to automate pieces or being able to automate your data hygiene is huge, and it really gives the organization the ability to get back in control of their data, and, you know, puts them in a better position to deliver on this promise of, you know, better customer experiences throughout the journey, and certainly save a lot of time and effort in the process.
Absolutely. Jeff, I'm not sure. HubSpot Jeff, I don't know if you have anything else you want to add, or if we want to move into the first question.
Well, I think SmartBug Jeff covered it really well. That was you're dead on there. I wanted to get back. I think we're going to cover or dive into some of this data, but I want to go back to this 3% of companies meeting basic data standards. The way that study was run was they brought in a bunch of executives, had them define what great data looked like, and then had them go back and dive into their own data to figure out if it met those standards. So they set their own standard and then discovered that none of them were meeting it. And if you think about, okay, so what's the next step after that? It falls on the ops team. They're going to go to the ops team, who's kind of the de facto owner here, and they're like, okay, we got to fix it. When we introduced Ops Hub, which was 2021, the process of that really introduced me to RevOps, right? And a lot of organizations have sales ops, marketing ops, data ops, et cetera. But it's really, you know, I think of it as RevOps. And it's this super messy world of amazing people. They're all, you know, scrappy problem solvers. And they wear, even at big companies, like 10 different hats. And what I have come to believe, and what I think is part of like our thesis at HubSpot, is that great operations are what's going to give our customers the edge when it comes to creating a world-class end customer experience. It gives people the data to make those better, you know, those great engagements, to leverage that data to have great conversations and point to, you know, maybe features that people could be thinking about or adopting. And so, you know, my job became, how do we give the ops team more powerful tools that make their day easier, make them more successful, and take some of the grunt work that they're currently having to do, right? And we'll get to that 40% number hopefully in a second, but we'll take some of that grunt work off their plate so that they can focus more on the strategic tasks that really move the whole organization forward and make them look good.
Yeah, I love that. And, you know, it's funny because our first question here is, why is HubSpot setting out to solve cleaning and prep? Like, why is this happening now? And I think that you really just touched on that. You know, the fact that isn't this all an ops job? You know, it's everybody. And so you've already started that process. And
Yeah, absolutely. And we've launched so many features over the years, and they're incredible, but so many of our customers weren't able to either leverage them or leverage them as much as they want because they didn't trust the data that was underlying all of it. And that theme became so consistent that I was like, we need to spend some time really focusing on leveling up the quality and the confidence that they have in the data. It's not always just about the quality of the values. It's also about like how much trust does everyone in the organization, all the teams that live in the CRM have in the underlying data. So when we dug into what would drive better data, this is where people were spending a lot of their time. This is where that 40% number was coming from. One, a ton of time in Excel prepping the data to make sure that it went when it got like bulk imported or integrated, when it came over in some kind of integration and published in the CRM, it's good. Second, the data that's in the CRM, so maybe that's like a manual entry or previous bulk imports or an integration or something like that, they had to clean that too, because the reporting that's pulling off of that inside of HubSpot has to be really good. You know, when you send a report off to your CEO, the last thing you want is them questioning whether that data is any good or having you double check that before it goes in the board deck or something. And then finally, there's this kind of last bucket that was kind of tough to put your finger on, but it was just, they were just prepping. Like they just were never feeling super confident in the data. So why not just spend a little extra time, just export all the values and just kind of look at all of it in Excel. They weren't going after anything specific, but they didn't want to get caught with some bad, issue. Somebody filling out a form with, an email instead of a first name, and then that going out in a personalization token as part of an email campaign. So that's what made up that 40% number. And if we're ready, of course, I would love to talk about some of the features that we ship to combat this.
Yeah. And I just have to laugh a little bit because I love how how they set the standard for what it was that they thought clean data was. They said our data is not clean, and then everybody's kind of working to move this forward. And as somebody myself, I've worked in everything from SaaS startups to enterprise HR techs, and as a marketer. And kind of as you were saying, like I've always been the ops too. Like there's even at those large enterprise companies, like I'm still the one who's got to make sure that list import, it didn't have anything that came in that is now dirty data, or that, if we've turned off an integration and now it's like a snapshot in that point in time of what that data brought in, it's no longer live feed. Like we have to be aware of all of that, right? I don't have that extra person, or didn't always have that extra person that was in there checking all of that for us. So this has truly like always been a problem that's been in my court as a marketer. And before we move into like the actual features, I would just love to know from SmartBug, Jeff, is in your experience, is this something that we're hearing other clients say too, or am I just super lucky and I've always been that getting that catch-all position?
No. No, we hear it. And we hear it, we hear it a lot, right? And I think whether you're working in an organization where there is dedicated marketing and dedicated ops, or whether you are wearing all those hats, right? It comes back to trust. Jeff said it, you've said it, I've said it, right? That trusting that data is so absolutely critical. And if you can't trust it, it starts to just permeate itself across the entire organization, right? Marketing isn't going to be able to build the kind of personalized campaigns that are going to drive results and or, again, align with the expectations of the people that they're reaching out to. Sales is going to constantly question, right, what information and what data they're working with in their outreach. And then bigger picture, right, when we're spending all this time trying to clean it up or manipulate it or fix it or piece things together to try and make it the best we can, right? Again, whether you're talking about multiple organizations or a single person or single people wearing many hats, all of that time that you're spending trying to get yourself to a place where you trust it is time that could have been spent being more strategic about what you're going to do with it, right? And that's sort of the I don't know if it's hidden, but it's sort of that other piece of it is like it really does suck up time that your organization can be using to be much more strategic and creative and thinking about your audience strategies and your messaging strategies and all these things you can be doing versus just figuring out like, oh my, like how do we get this to a place where we feel like we can actually use it and get something out of it. So I think that's that's the other thing that we just absolutely can't overlook. And I think, you hit right on it, sort of, Nikki, in asking the question.
Yeah, I agree. I think that with everything that I saw at Inbound in terms of the new features, there's so much of it in there that I'm just thinking, yeah, that's going to free up time. Like that's going to be a great opportunity for us. So I'd love, let me click over here to the next one. I'd love to talk about how HubSpot users are going to benefit from the flexibility that's offered from these new customization features. So HubSpot, Jeff, can you give us a bit of an overview for anyone who missed the spotlight? Specifically, I'm thinking around, objects and properties and kind of how that customization can benefit us.
Yeah, I think I'm going to be a little time hog here because I want to talk about these customization features, and I don't want to snooze on or miss some of the data quality stuff that we released too. So if everyone will forgive me, I'm going to try to cover both, and I'll try to pause between the two. So first, I just want to talk about data quality stuff for a second because that's what's been my life for the last year, and I can't wait to talk about it. So let's go back to, or I just want to reiterate some of the problems that people are having here, right? And I think you just hit on it, Nikki. It's like you look at what your to-do list was, and you've got clean this up, get this data in so that we can send a great marketing campaign, a couple of other things, and then all the way down to the bottom, it's like, let's do that strategic task that I know is going to like level up the teams, but going to take a ton of my time. So let me talk for a second about a couple of things that are going to save people a ton of that prep and clean time, and then I'm going to get to customization. That's kind of the next layer on top of this. So the first thing we shipped was pre-import validation error checking. So what we were seeing was customers going back and forth during import. They try to import a file, they get their errors in HubSpot. The way it works in HubSpot today, or it used to work, is you have to download an error file, go back to your original import, make the changes, try again. And these were common errors like drop-down property, option was missing, or the date formatting wasn't quite right. And so again, it's just more time in Excel. So now what we released is something that's going to analyze part of your file. It's going to call those errors out, and it's going to let you fix them in the import. So much smoother experience. We were seeing people like 20 plus attempts to get their imports right. Now you're going to get it done the first time. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That task on your to-do list ends up being your whole day, right?
Yeah.
And then I think the next thing that comes there is bringing some of our data quality tools like duplicates checking and some of the formatting checking that we can do right into the import flow. So now suddenly these bulk imports where our ops teams are getting files of dubious quality, incomplete files, etc., you can still have great confidence without a ton of time put in that data is going to end up being good to use in the CRM. Okay, second thing, we introduced property validations. So you can now set rules about what kind of values are acceptable inside of your properties. So for example, if it's a string property, like a name, you can say, we don't allow special characters in here, like a number sign or an @ symbol. And again, that means that the names that you send out in your email campaigns, they are actually real names, hopefully, or just prevents you from making those fat finger errors or copy errors that happen all the time. If it's a number property, you can set decimal places. So that's great for enforcing round numbers like number of employees. And then to give people this bird's eye view and feeling of overall control, we launched a new data quality command center, which I think we're going to talk about a couple of times here. I'm pretty excited about it, but it gives people access in one place to these property issues, record issues like duplicates, and syncing problems. So it's part of that whole like prepping bucket that I was talking about. You don't have to just click around all these different tools in HubSpot, kind of hunting for a potential problem that was going to sneak up and get you. It's like we're going to put it all in one place and make it easy for you to get into. And then the last thing that I'll call out is we launched automated formatting update. So check it out. So you could say, I always want my first and last name field to be properly capitalized, and you never have to touch it again. You never have to worry about your reps entering it properly again. The system will just enforce it and fix it for you. So that the time saved and the confidence gained just in those, I think we launched probably 7 or 8 features, and I'd love to take the full hour to talk about them. But just in those, I think we're going to move that data confidence and quality forward significantly. Now, if you're ready, there's a couple of customization things that I want to talk about. But actually, maybe Jeff, I should let you weigh in. Is there any of that you found particularly interesting?
I know from our perspective, the custom object builder is humongous, right? It's huge. But with that said, keep going. I don't want to bust up your flow here, man. You're on a roll. Like, go.
Well, thank you, and thanks for the tee up on the custom object builder. So, yeah. what we're trying to do is help customers represent their full business in HubSpot. Right, and the CRM, it's like a second brain. It's meant to store the data and the context that can be surfaced to your team so they can focus on selling, serving customers. And in order to get there, we've been doing this for a couple of years. It's been our focus. But in order to get there, we had to become much more flexible than we've been in the past. And what we're trying to do, what we spend a lot of time thinking about, is how do we achieve that flexibility while keeping the opinionated defaults that make HubSpot really easy to pick up and get started with for small businesses. So we've launched custom objects. We took a big step forward this year with more flexible associations. And then at INBOUND, we launched a couple of new things. And you just teed me up perfectly for one, which is the custom object builder. We launched custom objects in 2020. And when we did, you had to create them via an API. And that led an awful lot of people to ask, what is an API? And it stopped a bunch of people from either using them at all or using them to their fullest extent, because to create one, you'd have to go to your dev team or you'd have to go to an external partner and get their help. It just was a lot of friction in the process. So we took some time to learn, what does creation look like? What's necessary in creation? And now we've rolled out a new tool that lets you create custom objects through the UI. It takes like 10 seconds. I've timed myself. You're gonna be shocked how quick it is. And then we've now added other functionality inside those settings so that once created, you can set up a pipeline. You can set the associations. You can go and create all the custom properties that you need. And then, Nikki, you had it on the screen a second ago, but we also launched a data model overview. And this means no more guessing what your HubSpot data model looks like. This screenshot is from my portal. I got a mess in there. But when you create a custom object like robots, for example, you will see changes reflected immediately. Let's everybody get on board about what our data model looks like.
I've got some other, I pulled some of these from the Spotlight specifically. So glad to hear that it's inside yours, that you're probably the mastermind behind taking the screenshots originally before Stephanie presented them. Yeah, and I don't know, I can click on to the next question too here if we think that we've covered this area well enough.
Well, I feel like people are probably getting sick of hearing me talk, but is there anything that you both feel like I should be digging in a little bit more here? Anything coming up in the chat that you all want me to cover?
I think
you can always follow up.
Yeah. Great. Unless SmartBug Jeff. Oh, I've got a question here. Okay. So let's see. And it disappeared. Is the proper capitalization for first name, last name on a contact record automatically turned on? I know you were mentioning that earlier, that you can set that. But do we have to turn that on and set the rule up ourselves as admins, or is it something that now it's like an automatic function?
Great question. So there's two ways. Well, actually, what I'll say to answer your question is you still have to turn that on. I think a thing we're going to maintain is that the admin has control over turning these on, and that we maintain visibility or like a history of what's been changed. So you can think about it like a workflow. You go and you elect to turn this on, and then you can go see what records have been updated. If you go and turn on your portal right now, it'll tell you immediately how many records are going to be updated throughout your existing data, and then it will catch and update new ones, and you can see the log afterwards.
That's nice. And super familiar too, because it's how the workflows function, right? Where it's like, okay, you've got this many contacts that are going to enter in this. You can check them out. Are you okay with that before we click yes? So good to know that it's kind of consistent with the way that the current user experience is. and other functions. Awesome. So I'm going to move us on to the next. Whoops, are we really on that question already? All right. So I would love to talk about, you know, and it might be too broad of a question, but SmartBug Jeff, I'd love to know what HubSpot customer use cases you envision where data management can be improved. And I know it's like, again, it's a really broad bucket, but I'll let you take a stab at it here.
Yeah, there's I mean, there's a couple that come to mind that, when I was sort of going through this and listening in and reading that kind of jumped out at me. I mean, I think big picture thematically, it goes back to, again, increased efficiency, right? Time saved, being able to put plans in place based on the kinds of things that some of these new tools enable from an efficiency standpoint, like the property validations, right? We talked about having too many cooks in the kitchen before, right? And lots of different people and tools pushing stuff into there. Those property validations can effectively stop that from happening, right? So we can make sure that the data that's being pushed in the CRM is being pushed in the format that we want it. Removing the need to have to go back and clean it up later, right? You can stop it at the point of entry, which is really, really, really great. There was one little feature that I was listening in about being able to automatically calculate the end of contracts, right? Being able to look at the data in a contract and be able to say, oh yeah, well, based on this contract is going to be coming due in 3 months. That's a big deal, right? That's a huge deal to be able to develop those plans around that, get that proactive outreach in place as opposed to guessing or have to pull it in manually. That's a humongous thing. I know it's something like for us immediately, I think is like a huge win. Being able to develop different views, right, on a record for different teams, right? Different teams being able to look at a set of data in a way that's most appropriate for them, I think is huge. And I just the data quality command center, that's just very visual overview of being able to look and see, like, what do we have here? Like, what does it look like? Where do we have duplication? Where do we have missing information? Like, that's such a powerful view, right? To be able to look at your data in aggregate and understand what are the key things that we have to solve for, or what are the issues that are coming up most often. So again, for me, those are types of things, right? But big picture, it all comes back to just, again, creating more efficiency and creating more time for you to think more about how you're going to, address your marketing, right? And reach out to the people in that database versus constantly trying to figure out how you're slicing and cleaning up that data. It's just the efficiency piece just keeps jumping to the top for me, for sure.
Absolutely. And I know, we've kind of touched on it a couple times now, but in terms of using the CRM to benefit everyone under the RevOps team, part of why this comes to mind is what you were just talking about with the different views. I'd love for both of you to kind of weigh in on how you view all of these customization pieces really working for the entire RevOps team.
Sure. Jeff, if it's okay, I'll jump in first here. It's like I said, the CRM is there to represent your business. And then when it comes to the data presented, it's all about getting the right data to the right people at the right time. And it's got to be presented in a way that makes it really easy for a rep to digest and then go and get their job done. Whether that's they're on the phone and then they need to do a quick check, what other competitors have they looked into, or how many tickets has this customer had? Maybe I need to present them like slightly different service because of it, something like that. And so for me, where my brain is, or how it works, getting the highest quality data underlying that was step one, right? And we're well on our way. But HubSpot being HubSpot, we had to start step two. We had to start it early, and I think we showed off a little bit of what we can do at Inbound. And what I think you're going to see soon are tools that make displaying the right data on index pages and record pages easy for internal developers and our solutions partners. Like actually being able to take control of that content in more ways than you've ever been able to do so before. And I think it's going to lead to just like an explosion in both creativity and, of course, productivity, because it means the right data is being served up in the way that your business needs it. Just like one example that I would give is we have scoring properties in HubSpot, and people use them to understand how likely is this person to buy, or this company, this prospect to buy. In the future, we would love for them to use it for how likely is this customer to churn? How much they need attention right now so that we can continue to retain them? Well, having that score property just kind of wherever on that left sidebar or buried in all properties, the way that the CRM works now, is fine. The data is there, but it's maybe not the way that a rep wants to digest that data. When this is what they do. They go record to record, or they go index page, they go right down it, and they want to see which of these companies, which of these customers do I need to pay attention to. And so being able to design it more the way that their reps want to work is going to be a game changer for our customers and open up tons of opportunity.
I love that. Like, as you were saying this, even, I love that I get to learn things on here too. We use that scoring, but we use it in terms of the RevOps umbrella. We only use it really for, the sales marketing portion of that. I didn't even think to go through and, we might be able to use that in terms of, like you're saying, for churn and to score everybody there too, and just use the full customer journey on that, right? And don't just stop at the top of the funnel, at the front end there, at the beginning of the flywheel, I guess.
Absolutely. That's always one of those maybe underappreciated things or underserved kinds of things, is just getting that customer health scoring in place, right? So you can have those sort of predictive elements and act sooner. And I think it's something that a lot of organizations struggle with.
Yeah, and so if you play out that scenario, it comes down to for different teams displaying different data, and then having someone internally, or we even imagine our partners being able to dig deep into those use cases and saying, we have a new layout for customer success managers. Why don't you try it out? And if it's just a click of a button away, and now you have that layout you can play with inside of HubSpot, just moves people, these busy people who are kind of learning it on the fly, it moves them a huge step forward.
I love it. And we actually just got a question in from the audience too that I'd like to stop us for a second and answer. So it's for HubSpot, Jeff. Which areas of HubSpot do you think are being the most under-leveraged for ops, data model management, data quality? And are there some clever, high-impact, low-effort tricks that you think people should start with?
Oh, goodness gracious. That's a great question. Where do I want to start? What I have noticed is that what happens in the CRM a lot is you start out, especially if you start out as a small business using a CRM, you experiment with new properties, you experiment with customization settings, and it's easy to kind of throw stuff in there as you're growing really fast and things are changing. Then all of a sudden you get a couple of teams on the CRM, and you get, like Jeff said, the number of cooks in the kitchen start to really ramp up, and it becomes harder and harder for people to find the data they need. And nobody's great at giving this feedback, but they'll just say generic things like, I just can't find anything that's helping me in here. I don't want to use this tool because it's not helping me do my job. And so maybe this is just how my brain works, but I have found that there's transformative power in figuring out what data do we really, really need, and let's cut back to just that. And it starts with assigning a data owner who is going to really keep track of how much data we're throwing at our sales reps, how this data is customized. When they open, we have like a full properties area on a record. What's in there, and how far do they have to go to find that data that they really need? When you have someone who's really digging in on that, and they're throwing out everything that you don't need, which sometimes means you have to push back on your execs who are like, let's just throw another question into record creation. Let's just throw another question into that playbook because I'm interested, or we think we might leverage that data later. You really have to go back and clean that up. So it's not much of a trick. it's more of a bunch of work that you need to do.
Mm-hmm.
But that's part of why we created the data quality command center, is go back and look at those properties that aren't being used, or you had two cooks who created pretty similar properties, and now people are getting like friction around which of these do I use for reporting. Go back and check that stuff out. What's not being filled in, what hasn't been filled in a while. And when you do the work to clean it up, which I recognize is still a lot, and we're going to do some work to make that easier, you're going to be really happy with the end result, and so will your teams.
I love it. And like I said, as I'm like learning, as we're talking here, I'm just tallying up a list of things that I want to do once we're off this call. We actually have another question that came in too from Harris. So he says, it seems like there are nice improvements for first-party data, but he's curious if there's anything that was shared at Inbound or that HubSpot has going on about third-party data, specifically enrichment data to help refine ICPs.
Yeah, I'll take that too. So we are thinking a lot about third-party data. Right now, I think the main improvement there is in this import step. So you think about people who are handed files from Zoom Info or whatever, and they want to make sure that the data that they're asking their reps to prospect with is good. Start with making sure that it's high quality, like the values are high quality and worth working off of. I think where we're going is getting a better sense of how complete those records are that you're trying to prospect off of. And then probably improving our own enrichment capabilities. A lot of people don't know how much work we do on behalf of our customers to enrich data. And that's because we don't tell you. And it's also because we haven't invested in it in the last couple of months. So we are constantly refreshing the data, but I think you'll see some more from us on that pretty soon. Great question.
And I'm going to move us on to the last question here because we are close to the end. And I feel like we've already talked about this because, the features are really great, but no matter how exciting everything is as it's coming out, thinking of tackling a database that's full of unclean data is really overwhelming. And I know, Jeff, HubSpot Jeff, you mentioned really starting with the data quality and diving in there. I'd love to hear from SmartBug Jeff, what you kind of envision now that we know where to start in terms of the tool. How do you move forward there? What do you think?
Yeah. So HubSpot Jeff is a tough act to follow here. But it's start by acknowledging you have a problem, right? I think that's the beginning, right? And I think everybody sort of did that right at the beginning, because what happens is the longer you let it go on, right, the greater the likelihood that down the line you're going to have to rip it out, right, and a complete reset. And as painful as it might feel to start doing some of this stuff now, getting to that point where you realize like this is just not working at all and having to just completely flip it is just that much more painful. So acknowledge you have a problem, dive in. I'm going to follow up on almost exactly what Jeff said, which is get your team together and figure out what matters most, right? Sit down with key stakeholders, understand what pieces of the data are most useful, most actionable, most valuable, and really start figuring out how to make sure you have all of those in place and cleaned up. I think that's the biggest thing, and he hit it right on the head.
Well, let me add, I just want to add two things to that because I think that was perfect. One is I really encourage people to pick an owner of the data. It doesn't have to be one person for all the data, but if you don't have an owner for your data, it's not going to get worked on. It's a tragedy of the commons. And you got to expect that person to work collaboratively, right? I think SmartBug Jeff was totally right that you want them to get in a room with key stakeholders and figure out what's important, right? But somebody has to make the call and be responsible for it at the end of the day. That's what's worked for our customers. And I just encourage everybody to take that sometimes hard step. And then the other thing is setting good expectations around the fact that this is not a one and done. And for a long time, what people have done is spend a ton of time and money and brought in, partners or consultants to say, how do we clean up our data? And they can give you some great systems and great starting points, but it's still just a snapshot in time. A lot of people then end up kind of trending back to the data quality that they had before. So you have to know, and you have to buy in that if we believe better data drives better connections, then this is going to be an ongoing process and something we're going to invest in forever.
Yep, absolutely. And just as we've kind of mentioned a couple of times, it's 100% fills into all of those pieces within RevOps, and it's in all pieces of the funnel, and it does drive connections at every single one of those stages. And if you don't have that correct data in there, you can't segment properly, you can't talk to these people properly, you can't really just connect on a human level if you don't have anything to go off of to know who that human is and where they are in their journey.
Absolutely.
We're pretty much at the end of time here, and we've been answering some questions throughout. If anybody else has any more questions, feel free to drop them in the chat panel there. I do have 2 links for everybody that are HubSpot links. They are a list of the features that have rolled out throughout inbound and after, that might be really helpful for anybody that's wanting to dive in deeper or really understand a specific feature that just came out. So I will have our producers drop these into chats in all of the different live streams, so that everybody can get access to them. But we would love if anybody has any other questions to go ahead and ask. Otherwise, we're here to help. Both HubSpot and SmartBug, we're here to help you in your journey of making your data a happier space. I'm just so thankful that I was able to talk with both you, HubSpot Jeff and SmartBug Jeff, today. So I appreciate you for joining me.
It's been great.
Wonderful. All right. I think that's it. So thank you both.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks.
Have a nice day, everyone.